The soft blue glow of Lyra's skin reflected off the glass containers as she carefully labeled another specimen. Her three-fingered hands moved with practiced precision, their translucent blue membrane stretching as she sealed the sample of vegan moss. The research lab on Outpost Vega 9 was silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems. Lyra was the only Meridian on the station. Her people came from an ocean world, and even after 5 years among humans, she still felt like she was drowning in air. The moisture chamber in her quarters helped during rest cycles, but work hours were always uncomfortable. Her gill slits along her neck flexed unconsciously, seeking water that wasn't there. Specimen log 347. She recorded, her voice melodic despite the translation device. Vegan moss shows remarkable adaptive properties to radiation. Potential application for ship shielding. A group of human researchers walked past the glass wall of her lab. One nodded politely. The others didn't look in. It was always this way, professional courtesy without warmth. Humans found her appearance unsettling, she knew. Too similar to them in basic shape, but the differences, the blue skin, the large black eyes, the gills, made them uncomfortable. Lyra didn't blame them. She was, after all, the alien here. The station's announcement system crackled to life. Attention all personnel. Military escort vessel Dauntless requesting emergency docking for repairs. Arrival in 30 minutes. Engineering teams stand by. Lyra barely looked up from her work. Another ship meant more humans, more polite nods, more silent meals in the cafeteria with empty seats around her. She had stopped hoping for connection long ago. That evening, Lyra sat alone in the cafeteria, her food specially prepared with the nutrients her species required. The liquid meal looked strange next to the solid foods on other trays. Yet another difference that set her apart. The doors opened, and soldiers from the docked ship entered. Their uniforms were crisp, their movements disciplined. They collected their meals and filled tables on the far side of the room. Lyra returned to her data pad, reviewing tomorrow's research schedule. The soldiers' laughter drifted across the room, a reminder of camaraderie she didn't have. "Is this seat taken?" Lyra looked up, startled. A human male in a military uniform stood by her table, tray in hand. His hair was cut short, and his eyes were an unusual shade of green. "No," she said simply, expecting him to take the chair to another table. Instead, he sat down across from her. Lieutenant Mark, Engineering Division on the Dauntless. He extended his hand, then paused. "Sorry, I don't know the proper Meridian greeting." Lyra blinked slowly, a gesture of surprise in her culture. "A nod is sufficient," she said. "I am researcher Lyra. I heard about your work with the native plants," Mark said, starting to eat. "Is it true you discovered the bioluminescent properties in the vegan ferns?" Yes. Lyra wasn't used to humans asking about her work with genuine interest. They produce light through a chemical process similar to Earth's deep-sea creatures. "That's fascinating. We've been having issues with our emergency lighting systems. I wonder if there's an application there." For the first time in months, Lyra felt something unexpected, a spark of connection. This human was speaking to her as a colleague, not as an oddity to be tolerated. "Perhaps," she said cautiously. "The extract is unstable, but I've been working on a stabilization method." Mark smiled. "I'd love to hear more about it. Maybe I could visit your lab tomorrow." As he continued asking questions about her research, Lyra felt the familiar weight of loneliness shift slightly. It was probably nothing. A curious human who would lose interest once the novelty wore off. But for tonight, at least she wasn't alone. The next morning, Lyra arrived at her lab earlier than usual. She had spent extra time in her moisture chamber, making sure her skin had the proper hydration. She told herself it was for better work performance, not because Lieutenant Mark was visiting. The lab door slid open at exactly 900 hours. Mark entered, his uniform traded for the standard station work clothes. "Good morning," he said with a smile. I hope I'm not too early. Your timing is precise, Lyra replied. She gestured to her workstation, where several glowing plant samples were arranged. These are the bioluminescent ferns I mentioned. Mark moved closer, his eyes wide with wonder. The blue-green light from the plants reflected on his face. They're beautiful, he said softly. For the next hour, Lyra explained her research. Mark asked smart questions and took notes on his datapad. Unlike other humans who grew uncomfortable with her alien features, Mark maintained eye contact naturally. The stabilization process requires very specific conditions, Lyra said, leading him to a sealed chamber at the back of the lab. This biodome recreates the native environment. As they stepped inside, the door suddenly hissed shut behind them with a loud clank. Red warning lights flashed. Containment protocol activated, announced the station's computer. Potential contaminant detected. Quarantine in effect for 12 hours. That's not right, Lyra said, moving quickly to the control panel. There's no contamination. Mark joined her at the panel. Looks like a sensor malfunction. The system thinks there's a biohazard release. His fingers moved across the controls. I can't override it remotely. We'll have to wait for the engineering team to reset it from outside. Lyra's gill slits flexed with anxiety. The biodome has its own air and water supply. We will be safe, but we're stuck here together, Mark finished, looking around at the jungle-like environment. Well, at least the view is nice. Hours passed as they waited for rescue. The engineering team had discovered the problem but needed time to safely override the quarantine protocols. Mark and Lyra sat on a bench surrounded by glowing plants and the sound of artificial rain. Tell me about your home, Mark said, breaking a comfortable silence. Lyra hesitated. Humans rarely asked about Meridian. It is mostly ocean. Our cities are built in coral formations at different depths. My family lives in the mid-shelf region, where the water is clear and warm. Do you miss it? Every day, she admitted. The constant moisture, the feeling of water against my skin. She touched her dry gill slits unconsciously. But my work here is important for both our species. Mark nodded. I grew up near Earth's Pacific Ocean. Not the same, I know, but I understand missing the water. He paused. Why are you the only Meridian here? My people prefer to stay in water environments. I volunteered because my body can tolerate dry conditions better than most Meridians. She looked at her blue hands. But it makes me different even among my own people. Being different isn't always bad, Mark said softly. It takes courage. As night cycle approached, the temperature in the biodome dropped. Lyra began to shiver. Meridians struggled with cold temperatures. Without comment, Mark removed his outer shirt and offered it to her. Your comfort systems aren't working properly, he said simply. Lyra hesitated before accepting it. The fabric was warm from his body heat. Thank you, she said, wrapping it around her shoulders. No human had ever shown such consideration for her physical needs before. When we get out of here, Mark said, looking at the glowing plants around them, would you join me for a meal? Not in the cafeteria. My ship has a small observation deck. The stars look amazing from there. In the gentle glow of the bioluminescent plants, Lyra felt something shift inside her, a small, fragile hope she had thought long dead. I would like that, she said quietly. The observation deck of the Dauntless was small, but offered a stunning view of space. Vega's bright blue star dominated one side, while endless darkness filled the other. Lyra sat across from Mark at a small table he had clearly arranged specially for this occasion. Is the temperature comfortable for you? Mark asked, gesturing to the portable humidifier he had placed nearby. It released a fine mist into the air around Lyra. Yes, thank you, she said, her large black eyes reflecting the starlight. This is very thoughtful. A week had passed since their unexpected confinement in the biodome. The engineering team had finally freed them, making jokes about interspecies bonding time that made several humans laugh, and Lyra's skin flush a deeper blue with embarrassment. But Mark had kept his promise about dinner, and now here they were. I asked the ship's cook to prepare something special, Mark said, pressing a button. A panel opened, and a service bot delivered 2 covered dishes. It's not exactly Meridian cuisine, but it has similar nutritional properties to your usual meals. When Lyra uncovered her dish, she found a bowl of clear blue liquid with small glowing particles suspended in it. It looked remarkably like a traditional Meridian celebration dish. "How did you know about this?" she asked, genuinely surprised. Mark smiled. "I may have spent some time in the ship's database learning about Meridian customs." He uncovered his own plate, which held a human meal. "I hope it's acceptable." Lyra dipped her 3-fingered hand into the liquid, absorbing the nutrients through her semi-permeable skin as Meridians did. The taste was not quite right, but the effort touched her deeply. "It is very good," she said. "Thank you." As they ate, Mark told her about Earth, about oceans and mountains and cities. He spoke of his home near the coast and how he joined the military to see more of the universe. "What about your family?" he asked. "Do you speak with them often?" Lyra's gill slits fluttered slightly, a sign of emotion. "Communication with Meridian is difficult. The water interferes with standard transmissions. We exchange recorded messages every few months." She paused. "My family did not fully understand my decision to work among humans. They worried about you." "Yes, and they feared I would become too different." She looked down at her blue hands. "Perhaps they were right. I have been away so long, I sometimes wonder if I would still fit in at home." Mark reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. "Being adaptable doesn't mean losing yourself. It means you're strong." Their conversation flowed easily after that. Lyra explained Meridian breathing meditation, a practice that helped her cope with the dry air of human environments. Mark listened intently, then asked if she would teach him. "It is not designed for human physiology," she said, surprised. "I'd still like to learn," he insisted, "and I could teach you a human game in exchange. Do you know how to play cards?" Over the next 2 weeks, as the Dauntless underwent repairs, they established a routine. Mornings in Lyra's lab, working together on the bioluminescent plant research. Evenings on the observation deck, sharing meals and stories. Lyra taught Mark the breathing patterns of Meridian meditation. Though he couldn't use his non-existent gill slits, he adapted the techniques to his human lungs. Mark taught her to play poker, chess, and other human games. Lyra's face showed little emotion, a Meridian trait, which made her an excellent poker player. They barely noticed the stares and whispers from other crew members, humans watching their growing friendship with curiosity or disapproval. "Lieutenant Mark spends a lot of time with the blue alien," one engineer commented in the mess hall. "Maybe he's just being diplomatic," another replied. "Or maybe he's found someone who sees the stars the same way he does," said a third quietly. One evening, as they finished a game of chess, Mark looked at Lyra thoughtfully. "Tomorrow we're testing the repaired engines. If all goes well, we'll be leaving in 3 days." The words hung in the air between them. Lyra felt her respiratory system tighten. "I see," she said simply, her voice carefully neutral. "Your repairs are completed ahead of schedule. That is efficient." Mark reached across the table and, for the first time, gently touched her hand. His skin felt warm against her cool blue membrane. "I'd like to come back to visit," he said, "if that would be welcome." Lyra's gill slits fluttered rapidly, a sign her people would instantly recognize as happiness. "It would be very welcome," she said softly. The station alarm blared without warning, its harsh sound echoing through every corridor. Lyra dropped her sample container, blue liquid splashing across the lab floor as she rushed to the emergency console. "Attention all personnel," the computer voice announced. "Biohazard alert. Unknown airborne contaminant detected in ventilation system. All personnel report to designated safe zones immediately." The door to Lyra's lab slid open. Mark rushed in, his face tense with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, slightly out of breath. "I came as soon as I heard the alarm." "I am unharmed," Lyra said, her large eyes scanning the emergency data on her screen. "But this is serious. The sensors are detecting toxic spores in the air system." The Dauntless Asterisk had been gone for 3 weeks, but Mark had returned as promised, arranging to serve as a temporary security liaison on Vega 9. His superiors had been puzzled by his request for this remote posting, but approved it without much question. "Can you identify the contaminant?" Mark asked, moving closer to look at her screen. Lyra's fingers moved quickly across the display. "It appears to be a spore release from the northern continent. The station's external filters should have caught it." "But—" She stopped suddenly, staring at the readings. "These spores are microscopic, much smaller than any previously documented on Vega 9. The station's chief medical officer appeared on the lab's communication screen. "Researcher Lyra, we need your expertise. 3 crew members have already shown symptoms: respiratory distress and skin irritation. Our standard filters aren't stopping these spores." "I am coming," Lyra replied, already gathering her equipment. Mark followed her to the medical bay, where humans lay on beds, their faces red and swollen, struggling to breathe. "Why aren't you affected?" the medical officer asked Lyra. "Meridian respiratory systems are different," she explained, examining a spore sample under a microscope. "These spores target specific proteins in human lung tissue. They cannot attach to my gill membranes." For the next 14 hours, Lyra worked without rest, analyzing the spores while Mark coordinated the station's emergency response. The ventilation system was shut down, but residual spores remained in the air, and more crew members fell ill by the hour. "I need to get samples from the native flora," Lyra said, her voice showing rare frustration. "Something on this planet must have natural defenses against these spores. It's too dangerous to go outside," the station commander insisted. "The spore concentration is highest near the airlocks." "I'll go with her," Mark volunteered. "We'll use the emergency environmental suits." Outside the station, Vega 9's purple sky stretched above them as they collected plant samples. Even through her protective gear, Lyra moved with grace, her knowledge of the local ecosystem guiding their search. "These plants," she said, carefully cutting samples from a red-leafed bush, "show no signs of spore damage despite growing in a high-concentration area." Back in the lab, Lyra worked frantically, extracting compounds from the plants while Mark assisted. The medical bay was now overflowing with sick crew members. "I believe I have found a solution," Lyra finally announced, holding up a vial of green liquid. "This plant extract can be converted into an aerosol that neutralizes the spores." Within hours, the medical team had manufactured enough of the antidote to treat the affected areas. Slowly, the sick crew began to recover. In the aftermath, as Lyra monitored the last treatment cycle, Mark brought her a container of the special nutrient solution she needed. "You saved the station," he said quietly. "Without your knowledge of vegan plants, we wouldn't have survived." Lyra absorbed the nutrients through her skin, replenishing her depleted energy. "I simply did what was necessary." "You did more than that." Mark hesitated, then added, "When I saw how sick everyone was getting, I realized something. I was most afraid that somehow the spores would affect you too. The thought of you in danger." His voice trailed off. Lyra looked at him, her alien features unreadable to most humans. But Mark had learned to notice the subtle changes in her gill movements that indicated strong emotion. "Mark," she said softly, "these past weeks have been different than I expected. But we are from different worlds, different biologies, different futures." She turned away. "It would be illogical to pursue what cannot be." "Is that really what you believe?" Mark asked. "Or are you afraid of hoping for more?" Before she could answer, the medical officer called for her assistance, leaving her question hanging between them like the lingering spores in the air. The station had returned to normal operations. The spore crisis was over, the air clean again, and the sick crew members recovered. Lyra had thrown herself into her work, spending long hours in the lab analyzing the spore samples and developing better detection systems. She had not seen Mark for 3 days. After their conversation in the medical bay, he had been reassigned to help repair the damaged ventilation systems. At least, that's what she told herself. The truth, that he might be avoiding her after her rejection, was too painful to consider. Lyra's gill slits fluttered with a sigh as she recorded data on a new plant specimen. The lab felt emptier without Mark's questions and observations. She had grown accustomed to his presence, his curiosity, his way of making her feel less alien. The lab door slid open. Lyra looked up, expecting the research assistant who occasionally delivered samples. Instead, Mark stood there, wearing his formal military uniform rather than station work clothes. He looked different, serious and slightly nervous. "Mark," she said, her voice betraying surprise. "I did not expect you." "I know." He stepped into the lab, hands clasped behind his back in a formal posture. "I've been preparing for this moment." Lyra put down her instruments, confused by his formality. Preparing for what? Mark took a deep breath. In human culture, when someone wants to make a lifelong commitment to another person, there's a traditional way to ask. He moved closer to her workstation. "I wanted to do this properly." Lyra's large black eyes widened as understanding began to dawn. Mark continued, "But I also researched Meridian customs. I learned that on your world, life partnerships begin with a declaration of shared purpose." He reached into his pocket and removed a small object wrapped in shimmering blue fabric. "What are you doing?" Lyra whispered, her gill slits fluttering rapidly. Mark knelt on one knee, a human custom Lyra recognized from station entertainment programs. "Lyra of Meridian, researcher of Vega 9, I am asking you to marry me." He unwrapped the object, a small sphere that glowed with bioluminescence similar to Meridian bonding stones. "I offer this as a symbol of my commitment to find a way for us to share our lives, despite our differences." Lyra stared at him, completely still in the way only Meridians could be. "This is not a simple matter," she finally said. "We are different species, different biologies, different needs." "I know," Mark said, still kneeling. "I've thought about everything. Your need for moisture, my need for dry air. Your nutrient requirements, my food needs. I've already consulted with xenobiologists about compatible living arrangements." His voice grew softer. "But what matters most is that when I'm with you, I feel like I found something I didn't know I was missing." The lab door opened again. 2 researchers entered, then froze at the sight of the human soldier kneeling before the Meridian scientist. They backed out quickly, but Lyra knew news would spread through the station within minutes. "The others will not understand," she said quietly. "Some won't," Mark agreed, "but some already do. Captain Bell has authorized my permanent transfer to Vega 9 if you say yes." He held the glowing stone up. "I'm not asking for an easy path. I'm asking if you believe what we have is worth building something new." Lyra's hand trembled slightly as she reached toward the stone. "In my 5 years here, I accepted that I would always be alone among humans. Different. Separate." Her blue fingers hovered above the stone. "You changed that. You saw me as Lyra, not just as the Meridian." "Is that a yes?" Mark asked, hope in his eyes. "There will be many challenges," Lyra said, her scientific mind still processing possibilities and problems, "both practical and social. I know. Many will disapprove. I know that too. We would need to create new traditions, new ways of being together that honor both our cultures." Mark smiled. "That sounds like an adventure I'd like to share with you." Lyra finally took the glowing stone from his hand. In Meridian culture, accepting such a gift was as binding as any formal agreement. "Yes," she said simply. Outside the lab, the station's communication system crackled with the day's announcements, but neither of them noticed, too absorbed in the new world they had just created between them. The diplomatic hub on Proxima Station gleamed with polished metal and soft lighting, designed to accommodate dozens of species in comfort. Lyra and Mark sat side by side in the waiting area, an unusual pair that drew curious glances from passing officials. Registration number 4752, called an automated voice. Please proceed to Office 17. Mark squeezed Lyra's blue hand gently before they stood. Since their engagement 3 weeks ago, they had discovered that simple gestures of affection required careful adaptation. Too much pressure hurt Lyra's delicate skin. Too little meant she couldn't feel his touch through her membrane. Office 17 belonged to a human bureaucrat whose expression soured when he saw them enter. Lieutenant Mark Davis and researcher Lyra. The man read from his screen without looking up. You're requesting interspecies partnership registration. Yes, sir, Mark said firmly. We've completed all the required forms. The official finally looked at them, his eyes lingering on Lyra's blue skin and gill slits. These applications are rarely approved, you understand. There are significant biological incompatibilities between humans and Meridians. We're aware of the challenges, Lyra said, her melodic voice steady despite her discomfort with the dry air in the office. Are you? The man pushed a data pad toward them. Medical report indicates Meridians require 80% humidity to maintain optimal health. Humans develop respiratory infections in such conditions. Housing compatibility alone would require separate living quarters. Mark leaned forward. We've designed a home with separate environmental controls for different rooms. The technology exists. And careers. The official raised an eyebrow. Lieutenant, Interspecies Service Regulation 47B clearly states that military personnel in non-standard partnerships face restricted deployment options. I already accepted a permanent position at Vega 9, Mark replied. The man turned to Lyra. And you, researcher. The Meridian Science Council has expressed concerns about your situation. They believe your judgment may be compromised by extended isolation from your own kind. Lyra's gill slits fluttered with suppressed emotion. Has the council forgotten that I was sent to Vega 9 because I specifically volunteered for isolation work? Nevertheless, they are concerned. After an hour of questions and forms, they were directed to another office, this one occupied by a Meridian official. The room was filled with fine mist, making Mark cough slightly while Lyra's skin took on a healthier glow. The Meridian official, older than Lyra with deeper blue skin, spoke in their native language, clicks and musical tones that Mark couldn't understand without his translator. You dishonor our traditions by taking the human mate, the official said. Our people have maintained genetic purity for 10,000 cycles. Lyra responded in the same language, her tone respectful but firm. I seek no genetic mixing, Elder Trill. We plan to adopt if we choose to have children. The human's lifespan is shorter than ours. You will watch him age and die while you remain in your prime. This is cruel to both of you. Mark, following through his translator, touched Lyra's arm. May I respond? When she nodded, he addressed the Meridian elder. With respect, sir, humans have always known we may not live as long as our partners. My grandparents had 30 good years together before my grandmother died. My grandfather never regretted those years, even through his grief. The elder's gill slits closed completely, a sign of strong disapproval. You speak of things you cannot understand, human. By day's end, they had visited 5 more offices, met with skepticism and disapproval at each one. In their temporary quarters that night, Lyra sat in her moisture chamber while Mark sat just outside it, both weary from the day's battles. Did you know there were others like us? Lyra asked through the chamber's communication system. The official mentioned 3 other human Meridian couples, Mark replied. All faced similar resistance. And all eventually separated, Lyra added quietly. Mark pressed his hand against the chamber's clear wall. On the other side, Lyra's blue palm met his. We're not them, he said simply. Tomorrow we meet with the interspecies rights advocate. Things might be different. Through the mist in her chamber, Lyra's large eyes held his gaze. If they deny our registration, what then? Then we keep fighting, Mark said, or we find a place that will accept us. The galaxy is vast, Lyra. Somewhere, there's a place for us. For the first time that difficult day, Lyra's gill slits fluttered in the pattern he'd learned to recognize as a smile. The terraforming vessel Pioneer hung in orbit above a newly discovered planet, its massive engines silent as the crew prepared for the next phase of their mission. In the ship's observation lounge, the stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewports, casting gentle light over the small gathering assembled there. Lyra stood at the center of the room, her blue skin adorned with traditional meridian symbols painted in luminescent ink. The moisture generators created a fine mist around her, while the rest of the room remained comfortably dry for the human guests. This environmental compromise, like so many others, had become second nature over the past 6 months. Mark entered from the opposite door, wearing his dress uniform with new insignia, interspecies liaison officer, a position created specifically for him after their long battle with bureaucracy. His eyes never left Lyra as he crossed the room to join her. "Ready?" he asked softly. "Yes," she replied, her gill slits fluttering with what he now recognized as joy. Captain Rivera stepped forward, datapad in hand. As commander of the Pioneer she had authority to perform marriage ceremonies in deep space. Her initial skepticism about having an interspecies couple on board had faded as she witnessed their dedication to making their unusual relationship work. "We are gathered here to witness the union of Lieutenant Mark Davis and researcher Lyra of Meridian," Rivera announced to the small crowd of crew members. "Their partnership represents more than a personal commitment. It stands as proof that understanding can bridge the greatest differences." A ceremony blended traditions from both worlds. They exchanged simple bands, Mark's made of earth silver, Lyra's crafted from meridian coral that was comfortable against her sensitive skin. They spoke vows in both languages, Mark having learned the basic sounds of meridian speech, despite his human vocal limitations. When Captain Rivera declared them officially married under the newly established Interspecies Partnership Act, legislation they had helped create through their persistent appeals, the crew erupted in applause. "You may seal your union according to your customs," Rivera said with a smile. Mark gently touched his forehead to Lyra's, the meridian gesture of deepest intimacy, while his hands held hers in the human tradition. Later, in their customized quarters, half-dry environment for Mark, half moisture-rich for Lyra, with a shared neutral zone in between, they sat together reviewing their next assignment. The survey team found water-based life forms on the southern continent, Lyra said, examining the preliminary scans. "They need my expertise to determine if they're sentient." Mark nodded, looking over the security protocols for the upcoming expedition. "The captain wants me to establish first contact procedures. She says our experience with cross-species communication makes us the logical choice." Lyra's hand rested against the environmental barrier that separated their work areas. On the other side, Mark's hand met hers. "Did you ever imagine this would be our life?" she asked. "When you first sat at my table in the cafeteria." Mark smiled. "I knew you were special. I didn't know we'd end up pioneering interspecies marriage laws and living on a terraforming ship." Their quarters contained evidence of their daily adaptations, special air filters, dual environmental controls, separate food preparation areas. Mark had learned to sleep with the soft gurgle of Lyra's water filtration system. Lyra had grown accustomed to the dry air she had to endure during their shared meals. Every day brought challenges. Mark worried when Lyra's skin dulled slightly from too many hours in dry environments. Lyra fretted over Mark's occasional respiratory difficulties near her moisture generators. Their biology remained stubbornly different despite their shared feelings. But as they reviewed their work together, finishing each other's sentences and understanding each other's thoughts with increasing ease, those differences seemed less important than what they had built between them. "The survey team leaves at 600, Lyra said, closing her data screen. "We should rest." Mark nodded, rising from his chair. "I'll see you in the morning." Then, Before they parted to their separate sleeping environments, they touched foreheads in the meridian gesture that had become their nightly ritual. "Sleep well, my human," Lyra said softly. "Good night, my star," Mark replied, using the term of endearment he had created for her. As they separated to their environmentally distinct sleeping chambers, neither felt alone. Through the clear barrier between their spaces, they could see each other, different in almost every way, yet somehow exactly where they belonged.